Denise Roche.
And congratulate you on your promotion, I think it's a promotion, to assistant speakership. Mr. Chair, I'm going to restrict my comments to the Schedule 2, which is under discussion in this part of the Committee of the Whole House. And Schedule 2 looks at the consequential amendments to other acts. And in particular, I want to address my comments to the changes to the Wages Protection Act 1983, which is about ensuring that employers can make deductions from the pay of workers who are taking partial strike action. And rather sneakily, this amendment to the Parent Act, the Wages Protection Act, actually reduces the amount of time or notice that an employer has to give to an employee that they have made an overpayment. So in the existing Act, it says that it should be 5 days' notice, but this amendment also says, also makes quite a major adjustment. It says it will be 1 day's notice. Now, this is quite aside from the whole discourse around what a partial strike is or how much an overpayment is. That is dealt with in the previous part. But I must make the point that it's absolutely unclear as to how much workers will be losing when they take a partial strike action. And what is a partial strike? Lots of people aren't clear about it, and certainly it's not tested very well in the Part 1 of the Act. But of course, we're talking about Schedule 2 and Part 2 of it. My understanding and my experience, my former experience as a union official has been that partial strikes have not only been around refusing to work parts of employment agreement or parts of your normal work, but it's also been around things like bending some of the rules. And those rules include things like not wearing the proper uniform, wearing a badge, wearing different colours than what's described in your employment agreement. And workers have been able to be very creative about their partial strike action. We must remember that strike action only occurs after a vote, and it only occurs as a measure of last resort. When workers and employers, the negotiations have got to a point where there needs to be a bit of force applied to the relationship with the employer to get them to agree to decent pay increases. And I've seen some really remarkable and interesting partial strikes in my experience as a union organiser. Perhaps the most notable one was where a bunch of workers refused to wear pants. And this was about the uniform allowance not being paid. And they agreed that because the employer had breached the employment contract by not paying the uniform allowance, then they would only wear half the uniform. And so they didn't wear pants. Fortunately, they all worked behind booths like this. Just like this. So it wasn't a problem for any of the public, but it was certainly embarrassing for, well, the union organiser anyway.
Order. I'm now going to ask the member to come to not just mentioning Part 2, but actually debating Part 2. Really good story, but not relevant.
I was mindful, Mr. Chair, that yesterday you asked for novelty, so...
Novel and relevant.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So part 2 in Schedule 2 of the amended bill, the amendment bill actually talks about this changes to the Wages Protection Act. And I think if we look at what the Wages Protection Act was actually enacted to do, it is actually about protecting wages. And I believe that it's a sneaky and sinister attempt to amend the Act by reducing the amount of notice that goes to workers when what they're classifying an overpayment when someone takes partial strike. That is an unfair way to do it because there hasn't been any kind of discussion in the public arena. There's been no submissions on this part of the bill about changing the Wages Protection Act as a consequence of the amendments to the Employment Relations Act. And that strikes me as incredibly unfair and a mockery of the democratic tradition. Mr Chair, Schedule 2 about the subsequent amendments to the Acts. Also, I'll leave it there, thank you.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I've got a number of points I want to raise, but